we are on the last episode of the ukulele bass. On the previous video we built the neck and now it's time to connect it with the body and work on the rest of the details. I decided to add maple binding around the body, and instead of buying a specialty router bit for this, I bought a bigger ball bearing and adapted it to the original bearing from a rabbiting bit I had. This way I can create a 3mm rabbet around the entire body. Installing binding is not something mandatory on an instrument, but it makes it more resistant to moisture since it covers the end grain from the tops. It also gives some protection in case you bump the instrument on objects, and of course makes it look nicer and more premium. I banded the strips to continuously match the body contour. The method I used to glue the binding was rather simple yet effective. It consists on clamping it perfectly in place using masking tape and then drop CA glue to join the components together. I snapped off the ends and used a chisel to fit them centered as best as I could. I can now fill the spacings between the tape with thin super glue and wait a while to let it fully set, before removing all the blue tape. It's a good idea to apply more glue along the entire seams and apply a clamp here and there to help close any small visible gaps. Now I can plane it flush and spend hours sanding it fully. I laid out the place for the machine heads and drilled the appropriately sized holes. If you remember the last episode, I scored the scale lines with my X-Carve 3D carving machine, but after shaping the fretboard curvature, the deepness was lost, so I grabbed this super thin Japanese saw to score the lines a bit deeper. Let's hear some variations on the playing and types of strings. This is a piece of cow bone and will be shaped into a nut later, but for now I need to make a recess for it to sit a bit below the surface. Now it's time to make some basic inlay work using mother of pearl small dots that I also bought, and create a visual reference for the frets number 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, and 15. Unfortunately, the 12th fret had the dots misaligned in the end, but oh well. I dropped a little low viscosity CA glue over them just to make sure they don't come off in the future. I did the same procedure to the tiny dots on the edge of the neck. Made some final preparation and hammered the fret wire in place, working from the edges to the center and hitting them with a mallet. I snapped off the ends and filed and sanded everything super smooth. I drew the bridge on Adobe Illustrator and sent it over to CNCing it on the X-Carve. First, I used the 1/16 spiral bit to carve the saddle groove and swapped to a 1/8 straight bit to carve the rest. This machine was a very good companion during this project, and I could actually have cut many more things with it than what I did. I could probably make 70 or 80% of this build using just a computer and the X-Carve if I wanted, and if I was better with 3D drawing programs. I wanted to make this wangy piece less bulky, so I angled the ends. Wangy splits very badly when chiseled, so I ended up using a hand plane and a file. I need to make a saddle using another piece of bone. You gotta use a material that is super hard and durable since the strings will be rubbing against it all the time. Now I need to position it accurately at 51.75 centimeters from the nut. I sanded the bridge over its final place with sandpaper on the top to create a better fit in case any curvature is present on the top. I can finally drill the holes for the strings to pop through. After testing, I can glue the bridge permanently in place, and I used 2 dowels for alignment and a few drops of super glue to have the piece clamped quickly. I made pressure with a hand inside the sound hole and another one pressing down the bridge. Once it was secure, I did place a clamp just for a good measure. I installed the machine heads, but since I added multiple layers to the headstock, it became too thick, and later I had to make recesses to fully secure the machine heads. I then shaped the nut, trying to equally space the grooves for each string, and installed the pickup under the saddle. I got a preamp and pickup ukulele kit, as you can see on the second episode, but truth is that I ended up replacing only the pickup for a longer one. This one here was too small for the distance I had between the strings, and I could only amplify effectively 3 of the 4 strings. Anyway, I made space to insert the preamp and apply lots of coats of a hard wax matte finish. I could peel off the tape and inspect everything closely. The installation of the electronic components was pretty straightforward. I saw this tip online to drive the N-pin jack in place super easily, and it worked really well. Nice. I've been playing the bass all this time without the neck being glued to the body, and I'm finally doing that step. So I have to remove all the strings, disattach the neck and glue it back together. On the next day, I removed the clamps and applied the strings once again. It takes some time until they hold up tuned, and here you can hear again some differences on the sound connecting to the amp or not, being played with fingers or with a pick, and using the most traditional ukulele-based rubber strings that, in my case, didn't work so well. I guess more time and practice is needed to getting used to their weird touch and different playability. Also, they tend to be more difficult to hold the tune after being applied as they need some time to stretch. And here it is, done with the build and the episodes. A big shout out to Inventables for supporting this project and to all my Patreon supporters that really helped me to release more content and crazy projects like these. Thank you so much for sticking around during the entire process. It was very time consuming and expensive as well. I could have spent the same amount just by purchasing a uke bass from a music store, but still totally worth it. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next project.